Two friends meet up to drink some beers and talk about past times. Not yesterday, but long ago, it's scandals, wars and crimes. From Stalin's reign to Prohibition, Tudors, Pompey, Bush and NASA's mission, Edison's Vogue, Genghis Khan's rise to victory. Forget your old teacher, it's time for Pint-Sized History.
Hi there, I'm Joe.
I'm Zack.
And today is a special episode. Zack, why don't you tell us a bit more?
Well, today we're not just focusing on the landmark events of what's happened in the past. We're focusing more about the people. And it's part of a little sub-series we've got called Rulers and Leaders. We might workshop the name.
So who have we got for our first ruler or slash leader?
I'll be taking you back to 16th century feudal Japan for one of the primary unifiers of modern-day Japan. His name is Oda Nobunaga. Throughout the podcast, I'm going to say his name wrong, like, often. Like, when writing the notes and, like, reading them out to my partner, I was just like, I can't do this. I was saying Nobunaga. It's Oda Nobunaga.
Oda Nobunaga.
Yeah.
Got it. Oh.
And it can be Pint-Sized History without us drinking a little alcoholic beverage or non-alcoholic.
And we've done the same thing this time.
We have.
Is it wrong for us to be using Asahi on a Japanese pod? I don't think
Why are we
so.
both holding it like this?
Well, we're just showing to the camera. Right? It's a visual podcast. Obviously, for a lot of people, they don't watch, they just listen. But for some people that are watching, they want to see the really cold. It's really cold, by the way.
It's freezing. Mine's very cold too.
I'm
Just got to the
excited.
petrol station down the road.
Ooh.
Asahi is one of my favourite beers. Yeah, when I go to
Easily.
a pub and there's like a line of beers on the draft, I think Asahi's always got my eye. Like, I'd probably go for a pale ale, but Asahi's right there.
It's right there. It's at the top of the lager chain. The best pint I've ever had anywhere was an Asahi in Tokyo.
Oh, yeah.
Pint Asahi.
Because in Asian countries, when they drink Asahi, it's like sort of like a Guinness. Like the cream at the top, like the foam, is like it's cream for them. It's not just head. So yeah.
It was honestly the smoothest pint I've ever had. I couldn't believe it. It literally
Please sponsor us.
tastes like treacle. You hear that, Asahi? The smoothest pint you'll ever have.
Super trash.
There you go.
So, Oda Nobunaga. Just to kick off, he's one of the most important people in the unification of Japan. He paved the way for what's transformed Japan from a warring country, literally with warlords constantly fighting. It's like something out of Game of Thrones. It's truly crazy, this period of Japanese history. He came about, changed this all, and he turned it into what is like a modern-day centralized Japan, seeing peace and economic growth. Our story starts in Sengoku Jidai, which is the period in Japanese history from about 1454 AD to around 1600, which was, like I said before, this like crazy period of civil war and fighting and these local warlords fighting for power.
So this is medieval Japan we're talking
Feudal
about.
Japan, yeah.
14...
The 15th century.
15th century, guns are just about to come into the fray.
Big part of this story.
But at this moment, it's, samurai swords and, feudal systems and all that type of jazz. It's proper medieval.
Common misconception, samurai swords. I love a common misconception, Joe.
But samurai did have swords.
Yeah, of course they have.
So what if I said that's wrong?
Well,
They got swords, don't they?
yeah, but like samurais were not that popular, or that like centralized. It was usually just like peasants with spears called ashigaru, and they had like bow ashigaru or yari ashigaru, which were spear peasants. So not really as much samurais possible, but in like the bodyguards, the general, like the elite troops, like you'd have like samurais, something like that.
Right. I get that the samurai maybe weren't as
It's very
big
romantic,
a thing.
isn't it?
Yeah, you would romanticize it, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But they were around. It's just that maybe they weren't that prominent.
At this time in Japan, the structure of Japanese society sits with an emperor right at the top, like it does today still, actually.
There is still an
Yeah.
emperor, yeah.
But the emperor had no real power. He was sort of like a emperor in name only. Who did have all the power was the shogun,
Yes.
or the military leader at the time.
Well,
For
what
those-
does shogun mean? Does that literally just
I
mean
think it just means.
military leader?
I think it just means like military leader, like sort of like a Führer or something like that. Followed by powerful individual lords under the shogun called daimyos. And daimyos are basically like the heads of important clans who rule over certain provinces. I think at like this point in time, there are around like 300 daimyos. So they can be like minor daimyos to major daimyos. They were basically fighting for power constantly. They were always trying to one-up each other, trying to usurp each other, trying to take the other person's land, just constantly fighting, trying to find any reason to do so. It was like I said, literally Game of Thrones.
You want to become the ruler of the big one, but at the moment it's fractured. It's fractured kingdoms all trying to make their stake to become the number one.
Coming to the man of the moment, Oda Nobunaga.
Uh-huh.
He was born into the Oda Clan on 23rd of June, 1534. And I'm going to say a lot of names of clans and people, and it might get confusing at times. I would try and make it as simple as possible.
When you've got all these different, Japanese clans and big long names, it's hard to keep track of it all. So try your best.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have lots of patience.
If I'm even pronouncing it right. I saw you wink. I saw that wink.
I'm allowed to wink.
So he's born in a place called Nagoya, which is in the Owari province, which is almost between, like, sort of midway between Kyoto and Tokyo, which is like the middle of Japan. It's on an island. There are 4 main islands in Japan. This island is Honshu, which is like the main island.
What Tokyo's on.
Yeah, that's the middle one. Yeah, exactly. So we're Kyoto, Osaka, Tokyo, Kobe, Hiroshima, and Nagoya.
All the important places.
All biggest important cities on this island. The other islands are Hokkaido in the north, Kyushu in the south, and Shikoku, which is in the middle, just below Honshu. Nobunaga's father, Oda Nobunaga, is the head of the Oda clan at this moment in time. He's somewhat powerful. So he'd built up like a good amount of wealth and a strong army at the time, but he was nowhere near as powerful as some of the other daimyos. He was a bit of like an insignificant lord. Had control of about like half the Owari province. And Nobunaga was the heir to Nobuhide. He was the heir to the clan. He wasn't the oldest child of Nobuhide. Nobuhide had been a bit cheeky in his life. He had concubines, which are like mistresses. And he had an older half brother, who we'll get on to shortly. Because he was the heir, because he was the only legitimate son of Nobuhide, he lived in a castle from the age of 8, and he was given 4 chief retainers.
So this is the dad's place, and he's kind of this not particularly big ruler of this small area.
Yeah.
And he's a son that's kind of living at large.
He's being trained currently, because he's going to be the ruler of the Oda clan, so he's being trained currently by like top-ranking samurai officials to learn how to lead the clan. Like you said, he's kind of like living at large. He's a bit like not a playboy, not like like a Bruce Wayne or something like that. But he's quite goofy and weird. Like you can imagine, feudal Japan is like a place super centered on tradition and customs. And he is just not really one for that. He doesn't really like tradition or customs. He's got very bizarre behavior for a Japanese daimyo's sons at the time. He was referred to as the Fool of Owari. So it's nice.
You don't want to be called the fool, though.
I think it's quite a nice name.
Not if you're a narcissist, which I imagine Nobunaga is.
He's also called the demon spawn of the 6th gate, or something like that as well. So
yeah, see, these are
2
nicknames.
That's a cooler name.
They are, but they're going to come back to bite the people that have, named them. If he's this, aggressive kid that turns into this brutal ruler.
You call me fool.
Yeah, exactly.
How could you?
If you were the man that
Who's fool now?
coined the nickname, you're in trouble. You're in trouble.
Yeah, he was fucking ruthless, like absolutely brutal as shit. So
yes,
I'm sure that guy who called him Fool of Owari is still not alive anymore, but lived at the time.
Let's hope so.
There are some key players I'm about to set out for you just to kind of keep in your minds as we go through the story. The first one is the Imagawa clan, who were very close by to the Oda clan at the time. They're led by Imagawa Yoshimoto, and you'll find that that's a classic thing. The clan name is the first name of the person itself, so it's Imagawa clan, name is Yoshimoto. They're very, very powerful at the time, one of the strongest in Japan, and they're literally they're basically one province away from the Oda clan, so a very, very significant threat to them. The Matsudaira clan, who are a clan on the southern flank of the Oda clan in the Mikawa province. Notable members of the clan include Matsudaira Takechiyo, the Saito clan, or I think you might pronounce them Site, who are the northern neighbors of the Oda clan. They were led by Saito Dozan. At the time, Dozan also had a kid called Yoshitatsu, who is basically the villain, or like the sort of what's the opposite of protagonist? Antagonist in this story. And the Takeda clan, who are really strong. They're a bit further to the east of the Oda clan. They're led by a guy called Takeda Shingen, who is a sick fighter.
The Nobunaga family, the Oda family, are surrounded by threats. Not necessarily right at this moment. It's not like they are a family that are worried for their safety in this current day. But they know that they are a small fish in a very big pond filled with enemies.
I think like the main goal in like Japan at the time is like having complete control of your province and then being able to like turn out internally to externally and seeing what threats there are. But there are threats everywhere. For the Oda clan. Yeah. So like part of like Japan at the time is that you make alliances, you'll marry off daughters to sons and stuff like that. And that's what Nobunaga was. He was married to Nohime, who was the daughter of the Saito clan's leader Dozan. And an alliance was struck between the Saito clans and the Oda clan because of this. So some friends, but mostly enemies all around them. It's a tough time for the Oda clan, and they're not particularly strong. Oh, no, Joe. Guess what?
What?
Nobuhide.
What's that?
Oda Nobunaga's dad. He died.
Oh, see, I'd already forgotten his dad's name. It's so difficult to keep us. Who the F's that?
Nobuhide's dead.
No.
Yeah.
Shall I roleplay as him? As
Yeah, go for it. Why not?
Okay, spill the news.
Oh, no. Nobuhide's died.
Not Daddy. No. Oh,
Not
Daddy.
Dad. Daddy wasn't there.
I love you, Daddy. Rest in peace. Rest in peace. But also, now the realm's mine. Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, here we go. This is the first act of the story, and I've called it Establishing His Rule.
Yes.
Very, very well
Very
written.
important to establish rule.
So his dad's just died, and we know that he is a weird bloke.
At this point, how old is he?
He is 16, sort of 17 years old this time.
Wow.
So he's a young guy, and he's about to be the ruler of this like semi-powerful clan in the middle of Japan. Yeah. So at the funeral, I say he's a weird guy. Rather than putting down incense and praying, he throws incense at the altar, and following this, although there might be like a year or two between, his favorite mentor, disgraced by the lack of honor that Nobunaga has shown at his dad's funeral, commits seppuku. You know what seppuku is, don't you?
I absolutely know what seppuku is. Well, I'm sure maybe I'm going to miss something about it, but the seppuku is essentially, Japanese traditional suicide. Honor is so important to Japanese culture, and this is throughout history, which is fascinating for so many reasons. And we could talk about seppuku and honor in World War II. It goes that far, but even now in this moment, it's so crucial to the Japanese way of being that if you feel like you've been disgraced, if you feel like your honor has been ruined by yourself or by your family or anything, for a lot of people, they feel they have no other choice but to commit seppuku, which is essentially to get a small sword, I believe, and to essentially cut open your stomach, your intestines, until you
stab yourself in the gut, and then you go left and right across.
Okay.
And you kind of just like die.
Just cutting yourself open until you bleed to death, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I'll just rip apart all your organs and stuff, like kidneys, livers.
What you've just mentioned there is that it's the mentor of the son that's committed it because of what his mentee has done.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's committed the dishonor upon everyone. It's the fact that his mentee, this kid, this 16, 17-year-old, has done disgraceful acts. He, the mentor, has then committed seppuku, which is just insane. This concept that you feel so dishonored that for some kid's actions, you're going to kill yourself. That's
just life in feudal Japan at this time. And it's shocking. But this apparently had a profound effect on him. And after this, he changes his tune and kind of like grows up a bit and becomes a bit more mature. And this is what is widely considered the changing moment in Nobunaga's life, and going from this weird, bizarre, kooky guy to this person that eventually unifies Japan against all odds. Because deep down behind this kooky, weird guy, is an absolute genius. Like he's really smart. He wants to break social boundaries and traditions. Like he wants to bring guns into Japan and use them in armies, and he has great ways of ruling, like policies, philosophies, which are just completely state of the art basically at the time, like revolutionary innovations. So he's clearly got a lot of brains, but this is not apparent at the time. But this kind of shifts him into gear, and he starts taking himself a bit more seriously after this.
Well, maybe, you know what, in a weird way, maybe the mentor's actually smashed it with his last act.
Yeah.
He's literally, with his last moment, has kind of given, which I guess in a way maybe is part of the thinking behind it. Maybe the mentor's thinking is, I've already disgraced us, I'm going to go, but I hope that my final act, by doing this, I can wake up this mentee and make him realize this is your path, you have to change it differently.
His goal now is to unite the clan, get rid of all opponents, including within the family and also outside, because people outside the family are trying to influence inside, and there's just so many different actors, and he wants to make sure they're a stable force for his greater ambitions, which are not clear yet, but later are ruling Japan. Stick with me here, because this is an incredibly difficult sequence of events that happens from the death of Nobuhide, Nobunaga's father, to the unification of the clan. And I've decided, for those of you who are fans of the TV show, to do this in accordance with the show Succession, because it's sort of like that a little bit. So there will be some sort of spoilers here, not too many just yet. If you've seen a little bit of Succession, you understand kind of how this works. So the dad, Nobuhide, Logan, is gone. He's head of the company for 50 years. He's built it up from nothing to there being like on the stock exchange, trading at like 200 quid a pop. And now the crisis begins. The show begins. People are vying for power. He had the heart attack. All the kids are coming out for the woodwork. And Nobunaga is the heir, so he becomes ruler of the clan for now. He's kind of like a mix of what I'd say is like Roman and Tom. We'll call him Rom. He's the idiot who people think have like no chance, and the Oda warriors, the retainers, are split between who they want to succeed. They don't know if they want Nobunaga to rule, or his uncle Nobutomo, or his younger brother Nobuyuki. It's the Nobu here is a common theme. They're basically the Gregs of the story. they're just kind of, you know,
They're there.
They're there. They're kind of putting their thoughts into whoever they think is going to do the best and whoever will give them the most. Then you enter Nobunaga's older brother Nobuhiro. He's probably a bit of a Conroy. He's got some sort of power and influence, but he's illegitimate, which means that, you know, he's not really taken too seriously. But he has the favor of a lot of retainers in the Oda clan. He teams up with Saito Dozan's son Yoshitatsu. Yoshitatsu is probably like a hedge fund guy coming out from some sort of external clan to try and influence the power struggles and try and get a piece of the pie as well. So they team up, Yoshitatsu and Nobuhiro, and they try to depose Nobunaga, but Nobunaga finds out. He's smart, he's shrewd, he finds out the plot, completely botches it, and then decides to forgive his older brother Nobuhiro. Let's just retrace our steps very quickly. So Nobuhide's dead. Nobunaga is now the heir of the clan. He's now rules the clan. The retainers and the staff members and the military leaders, they don't know who to go for, so they're kind of all over the place going for brothers, uncles, people who might not be Nobunaga to try and take the throne with them. Now his older brother Nobuhiro has teamed up with someone from outside the clan to try and take control of the clan. Nobunaga finds out and stops the plan and then forgives his older brother. This is interesting because Nobuhiro was recently saved by Nobunaga when he was besieged in a castle, and Nobunaga got him out from the besieging army. He did a little trade and got Nobuhiro's life. Next, his uncle, Nobutomo.
The uncle.
Let's think like the senior management, like Jerry and who the other two guys?
Frank.
Frank, yep, the older people in the and like the PR guy. They're like, it's like Nobutomo. He's like the uncle. He's an older head. They're trying to take power. Nobunaga repels him, burns down his castle, and then forgives him. Again, he's very forgiving for internal family members, for now. But his uncle doesn't give up there. He plots to assassinate Nobunaga again. Nobunaga finds out again, because he's just into the streets, on the bull. You know, he's kicking on the ground. That's an expression. And puts his uncle to death this time. Because, you know, once fair, you know, one time, shame on me. 2 times, shame on you.
Yeah.
Kills his uncle. While this is all going, Yoshitatsu, who's the hedge fund guy from outside, who teamed up with Nobutomo, his older brother, has taken control of the clan to the north, who they were previously allied with, the Saito clan. Saito Dozan dies, the main leader, and it's argued that Yoshitatsu killed his father to take control of it. It's like so Game of Thronesy, just like sons killing dads to get a bit of power.
It is.
All that stuff.
There's all that intrigue.
So Nobunaga then loses a vital ally in the Saito clan. He's married to Saito Dozan, the guy that just died, his wife, Nohime. And because of that, his younger brother Nobuyuki, let's call him Shiv, because he's like the young one, thinks he's a bit better than he actually is, comes in and plots to another rebellion, but Nobunaga, our Roman Tom hybrid, finds out again. He forgives Nobuyuki because his mum, they share the same mum, and his mum pleads for him to forgive him. But then again, Nobuyuki eventually, I think, tries to start another rebellion again, and Nobunaga, I think, then puts him to death again. So, you know, he forgives, and then he forgets, and then he kills.
Nice.
This goes on for about 7 years, from 1551 to 1559. It takes about 7 years, but finally Nobunaga has eliminated all opponents. He's dealt with the problems outside the clan, not expanded the territory, but finally got complete control of the Owari province, which is their main home. Nobunaga's uncle, older brother, younger brother, and basically cousin by marriage tried to kill him and take over his throne over the course of the 7 years. But by the end of the time, they're either dead, failed and exiled, or have now just joined Nobunaga's side because he's the real deal.
Yeah.
He is the guy
He's the
right
big
now.
cheese
Yeah.
now.
This kind of like dictates his rise as this sort of military tactician and genius. He's not afraid to implement new technologies, which other people are afraid to use. Stuff like the matchlock rifle, which is, like you said before, the first iteration of the gun that the Portuguese introduced in the 1540s.
Yes.
And he's up for using them. He wants to use it. He wants to use whatever advantage he can to win the wars he has against him.
Which is funny as well, because we actually spoke about this. We've spoken about this many times, actually, over the course of the podcast, how there are moments in history where if you can find any leg up over your enemy, any leg up over the people around you, then you have to take it. And often the big stories, the big people, the big leaders that emerge and win these wars or battles or whatever is because they've used some tactic that's never been used before. And in Japan, the concept, as was the case everywhere, of using gunpowder, of using a gun, of using a musket or whatever you're using was a completely new thing. And when someone brought it on and brought it into the battlefield and started using it for the first time, it shredded and it became the weapon that then would go on. So in Japan, it was him that was the, I guess, user of this new technology, and it paid dividends.
That's what history teaches us. Those who embrace change and revolution typically end up doing a lot better than the counterparts.
And innovation.
Yeah.
Innovation especially.
There is a very famous story of Nobunaga. He set up, so he had like bow ashigaru and spear ashigaru, which were like the peasants that fought in wars. He set up matchlock ashigaru, which are like gun regiments of peasants. He equipped loads of peasants with loads of guns.
Which is crazy, because what year is this?
The 1550s,
Yeah,
1560s.
and he's got gun regiments.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not really a thing. Like, it's kind of nuts.
I'm skipping ahead, but he introduced what's called volley fire to the world, basically. This is like, ranks of musketeers shooting, coming back,
Right.
Reloading, someone else taking their place,
Yeah.
going forward, shooting, coming back, reloading. It's like constant barrages of fire.
Because the point about the very earliest guns that mankind had access to was that they had ages to reload. That was the problem with them. They weren't like guns today. It took. I think it was like a minute for a musket to reload, which
Something
is
like
if you think about it, that's an insane time to have to wait before the next volley. So what he did was revolutionary, because by doing this, you get rid of that time that everyone has to wait between volleys of shots.
Second act, Joe. What do you think? What do you think I've titled this one?
Expansion.
Ooh, close. Rise to power. Yeah. That's so close, yeah. Like I've just said, Nobunaga is a great fighter and leader. He's unconventional. He does things his opponents won't expect, and then he executes his plans with brutal efficiency. So I spoke about the Imagawa clan as well a little bit ago. They were led by a guy called Imagawa Yoshimoto. Imagawa Yoshimoto sought to expand his rule over more provinces. He wanted to march on Kyoto. Kyoto is the seat of the shogun's power.
Yes.
It's currently ruled by a
Capital.
Yeah,
Back
back
then.
then, before it was Edo, which is now Tokyo. I think Edo?
Yeah.
Edo?
I don't know. I don't know the name, but Tokyo wasn't the capital.
Yeah.
Kyoto was.
So Yoshimoto wants to drive to Kyoto. He wants to install a puppet as a shogun, which is typically what you do when you want power, because their name has far more reputation in history. So you get someone from a really popular family name or a historical family name to be the shogun, but you'll be all the power behind that. What lies between Kyoto and the Suruga province, Joe, where the Imagawa clan are from? What do you think?
Natural resources.
No.
Water.
No.
A mountain.
In this story.
Oh, Nobunaga.
Yes, Nobunaga. Between Kyoto and the Suruga province, where the Imagawa are from, is the Owari province, which is home to our dear Oda Nobunaga. So Yoshimoto drives forward to Kyoto. He sacks an Oda castle on the way, and then another castle. He's got about 25,000 men at this point, which is an enormous army this time.
Absolutely.
The Oda can only muster about 2,000 or 3,000 men. Nobunaga's generals at the time are begging him to take refuge. They're saying, they're taking castle by castle. We need to get out of the way. We need to stop them from wiping out our clan as they get towards Kyoto. Nobunaga says, fuck that. He says, no way I'm going to hit them head on. They massively outnumber you, over 10-1, but he's going to go for it. So he's only 26 years old at the time of this battle, and this is the defining battle of Oda Nobunaga's legacy. Okay. It's called the Battle of Okehazama.
Talk me through the battlefield. What's it like?
I'll-
Is it spread?
Importantly, the battlefield is not a battlefield.
Oh.
The Imagawa clan are camped out in this tiny gorge at the bottom of a mountain.
Don't want to be in a gorge.
No, they're sort of just like sitting ducks. This is an area that Nobunaga has been, he's been like riding around and playing around since being a young kid. They know this province like the back of their hand. And he knows that they've been drinking and feasting because they just sacked 2 Oda castles. They're celebrating their victories. So, Nobunaga takes his forces to Atsuta Jingu, which is a shrine in the province. A shrine.
Shrine in the province.
In the province. And then takes his men up to a fortified temple complex above. This is called Zensho-ji. He makes them construct straw mannequins and pretend like they have a massive army built on this fortified hilltop above the Imagawa clan's army. But in the meantime, what he actually does is takes the bulk of his army and drives head on at the Imagawa clan. They're all drunken, full on food. It's been raining, there's thunderstorms, there's mud covering all the
No one would
weapons.
attack while it's thundering and
No,
raining.
absolutely not. Not this crazy guy, the Fool of Owari. He's just driven head on 2,000 men against 25,000 Imagawa men who do not expect him, and he butchers the entire lot of them.
Wow.
He completely wipes out this Imagawa army.
That's insane. I mean, genuinely think about it. I mean, if you've ever been to like a big event, like a concert or a sports stadium or whatever, think about how big like 100,000 people is. Obviously, you've got to small it because it's 25,000. Then think about 2,000. I mean, you're literally thinking about like a group. 2,000 you can see. 25,000 is a complete. That's over 10 times as much. That's insane.
Think about any Premier League football stadium. The away fans fighting the home fans and winning.
That's a much better analysis. That's a much better analogy than what I just
I'm
said.
pleased with that
but
one.
that is literally exactly it. They just go straight into them while they're not expecting it and just take them all out.
Imagawa Yoshimoto is then eventually killed by 2 Oda samurai. So samurai do have still some role to play in feudal Japan. With his victory, Nobunaga's prestige, renown just massively increases. Imagawa clan, they were going to about to take the shogunate. They're the biggest clan in Japan basically this time. And he has just wiped them out with like 2,000 people. So this triggers just a monumental wave of support and an alliance building and relationships for the Oda clan. They build alliances with the Matsudaira clans, the Takeda clans. They conquer the Mino province. They defeat the Saito clan finally. They gain many of the retainers of the Saito clan in doing so. The list goes on and on. He builds alliances with the Aiza clan, the Issa clan, the Kitabatake clans. He defeats the Rukaku clans. He secures the submission of the Matsunaga clans. And then finally, 9th of November, 1958, the Oda clan and their allies enter the capital of Kyoto. He charges the shogunate and installs his puppet, Yoshiaki, who is now the effective ruler of Japan, but it's not. It's Oda Nobunaga. He's gone from, in 10 years' time or 8 years' time, from uniting his clan to destroying the Imagawa clan, to building alliances with powerful clans across Japan, and then finally conquering the capital, finally taking Japan. He's still not united it, but he's gone a long way in doing so. Interestingly, around this time, one of the warlords that sided with Nobunaga is a man called Tokugawa Ieyasu, who is also eventually one of the 3 great unifiers of Japan.
That's what they're called, right? The 3 great
Yeah,
unifiers. That's the nickname of the people that essentially made Japan from these squabbling little kingdoms into this unified powerhouse of a nation, Japan. Those are the 3. And who are they? So Ieyasu?
So it's Oda Nobunaga, who's the first one. It's then a man called Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who follows Nobunaga. He's one of his very trusted generals, and he does feature in the story a little bit. And then after him, it's Tokugawa Ieyasu. They basically, during the time they work for Oda Nobunaga, they perfect their craft. So they see what he does really well, they take that on board, but they also understand Nobunaga's limitations. So it gets through Nobunaga to Hideyoshi, and then gets to Ieyasu, who is basically the great climax of all 3 of them. And he's the one that really eventually unifies Japan fully and ends Sengoku Jidai. But this is all groundwork that has been totally laid out by Oda Nobunaga. So we now get to around the 1570s. So he's just conquered Kyoto in 1568, and he's gone on campaign after campaign. It must be tiring.
Yeah.
Do you think you could do it? 12 years of war? And it's not over
Yeah,
yet.
but it's not like every day is war. You know, some days are chilling.
What do you think you're doing in days you're not fighting?
I don't know, having a few drinks.
Tea? Tea ceremonies?
Yeah, well, maybe a few bevies in there, maybe a few hot baths.
They do drink quite a lot in Japan. They're big drinkers.
They love their iced wine.
Yeah, sake.
Yeah.
And now we get to what is potentially one of the more controversial moments of Nobunaga's kind of tenure in ruling Japan. And this is his bloody campaign against the Ikko Ikki, which is a really cool name, actually. IKKO-IKKI. Ikko Ikki.
Ikko Ikki.
They're a resistance movement. They're all Buddhists this time. Basically, they're called, I think, Shinto Buddhists in Japan. And this is a particular sect of Buddhism. And they basically try to rebel against samurai rule in Japan. And this leads to a really interesting moment in Nobunaga's reign called the Siege of Mount Hiei. This was an Ikko Ikki temple called Enraku-ji on Mount Hiei. Nobunaga basically completely razes this entire temple complex to the ground. They destroyed it, burnt all the buildings. But it's not just rebel warriors in this temple complex. It's filled to the brim with monks, laymen,
monks,
women, children, and they basically just go in there and eliminate everyone. Even the people that try to escape, there's just no mercy, mow them down. But I guess in Japanese history, like, this is quite a common occurrence of when they do get into war, when Japanese do fight, it's incredibly brutal. Like, if you think about the invasion of China in the 1930s, late 1940s, it's horribly brutal. They do not spare women or children. It's probably quite like a marked period of national shame for Japan.
One thing I do know about Japan when it comes to war and fighting is that it's about as bloody as it gets. Like everything is super, super bloody. Everyone's killing each other, not much remorse. And if the people that do have remorse really struggle to make it through because there's just so much bloodshed. It's like everywhere you go, it's just, the stories are pretty horrific.
Yeah, especially like the Pacific campaign as well in like World War II, where the Americans literally had to destroy entire units of Japanese soldiers because the last man would just pretend he was dead and then throw a grenade. They literally wouldn't go until the end. You had kamikaze bombers. They're that fanatic. Japan was a deeply Buddhist country, and the reason why Nobunaga has embarked on these horrible campaigns against the Iko-Iki is because he thinks to unify Japan, he has to reduce the power of the Buddhist institutions. So this was a part of his extended campaign to reach his goal, but it's incredibly bloody. This is Sengoku Jidai. This is the period Japan we're in. It's all fighting. It's all war. It's incredibly bloody. But to come out of this carnage and to emerge from this war, you need someone that is just even more effective at war, who is bloodier, who is hungrier, who is better at fighting than anyone else. And that's the only way you'll get someone to rise to the top. Strength, unfortunately, breeds strength, and it brings Japan back from this brink of madness, from just going at each other and killing each other, and daimyos killing daimyos, and different family members trying to scheme time. It brings that all to an end and unifies the country. So while horrible, may be necessary in averting further war. So now we get to the third part of the story, the final part of the story. What do you think it's titled, Joe?
Unification.
It's called The End, but unification would be better. So previously I said that Nobunaga installed Yoshiaki as the shogun, who is part of this a very historic house, and you put him in as a puppet and you rule in his stead. But by 1573, he had enough of this guy because he was constantly scheming and trying to get rid of him. So he sent him into exile. This guy then becomes a Buddhist monk called Shosan. You could say it's so sad that he suffered that fate.
Well, what fate? That he becomes a monk?
Yeah, well,
honestly,
it was a joke. It was a joke, Joe.
of all the people, I feel like he's actually had one of the better fates.
He's
so many people have died in the course of this story.
After this, the main rival to his rule, the Takeda Clan, who I mentioned before as well, try and rise up against him, and Takeda Shingen is the leader of this Takeda Clan. He's a great warrior, a real big threat to Nobunaga's rule. He dies, so it's incredibly lucky, and his son takes over his position, and he's a really inexperienced young man. And this is where we see the full benefit of the matchlock ashigaru that I said before, the gun-wielding peasants. He sends Takeda are known for their really great cavalry units. They're great on horseback, and he sends basically the entire Takeda cavalry army against Nobunaga's lines, and these gun-wielding peasants just shred through them. A couple of thousand peasants just destroy this entire army in the tens of thousands maybe, which kind of speaks to Nobunaga's value as a military leader. So this is about, I think it's 1574, 1575. Right. Nobunaga has achieved so much. He's been in rule for 5-6 years maybe now, essentially in rule. He's united a lot more of the country. He's gone on campaign after campaign, like I said, just slowly every year building more.
He's
and
been
more
fighting
provinces.
his whole life.
I know, and he's bloody good at it. So let's talk about the things that he's done. He's developed unique ways of fighting with guns, which were a recent introduction to Japan. He's gone against customs tradition in doing so. He hires people based on skill and merit rather than lineage, which is really important in Japan because people promote for name rather than actual merit. So he assembles the brightest and most skilled minds in Japan under his rule. He mobilized a professional army, which, like we always talk about in episodes, is a really important thing when someone starts centralizing power, like King Canute in the Vikings, who brought professional military basically into being. He taxed commerce more than agriculture, which is a big thing at the time. He taxed the peasants, not the mercantiles and the craftsmen, that sort of stuff. He abolished road tariffs. He built guard stations across the territory. He strengthened the navy. He promoted commercialization. He increased the circulation of goods and money through these policies, and moved Japan into an early modern era of centralization. So not only a great fighter, but generally a great leader. And it's clear some of these things should be dead obvious. We look at it now, these things we have constantly in what we live in.
You constantly think that, don't you?
Not
with the benefit of hindsight, you constantly think should this not have already been a case for years? It's crazy that it's taken this long, but in reality, that wasn't the case.
No.
If you didn't know everything, if you didn't know everything in front of you, then you would have it would take years and years and decades and millennia to figure this out. And then when some person comes through and has the breakthrough, suddenly it just stays that way forever. So yeah, he was essentially a pioneer of all these different things.
I think the reason why he's gone for these policies as well is that they're all underpinned by this goal of unifying Japan. And he thinks everything he does will support him. A great economy will support a great military, which will support a great unified, centralized Japan.
Do you think his ambition from the beginning was to unify Japan? Did you think he was that ambitious as a man, as a boy? Or do you think that it kind of grew as he realized how popular and good at fighting that he was?
I think he probably did have this insane ambition. I think that's probably why people thought he was bizarre and strange and kooky. It's probably because he had these grand designs and ideals. When look at the reality around him, it doesn't look great. Like they're a very, very weak clan.
They were pinned from all sides.
Exactly. Like it's all stacked against him. And maybe, the reason why he's like, maybe he was in the playground saying, I'm going to rule Japan one day. And that's why everyone thought, oh, the silly Nobunaga, you're not going to do anything. But based on how skilled he was doing it, it's clearly part of his tutelage when he grew up, and he obviously trained with this ambition and learned from great minds in the clan. So it definitely must have been a part of his upbringing, or at least his desires. But I don't know. Could be wrong.
Well,
go talk to a Japanese historian. They'll know more.
No one knows, I imagine. And I get the impression that I agree. I think he probably learned. Actually, I don't know. I actually disagree in a sense. I think he probably learned as time went on. But he always had this thought in the back of his mind. Maybe I could do it all. I think you have to have a little bit of
oomph about you.
Oomph and yeah.
In 1582, Nobunaga travels to Honnoji, a temple in Kyoto, which he frequents for tea ceremonies. He had 30 staff members with him, and his son brought a couple of thousand cavalrymen, because I think they're going to go after this to some siege, basically. So, fighting is always in the background. We could go for a tea ceremony, but we got to have a war afterwards. So, enter Akechi Mitsuhide. Why do I say enter like a playwright? So he is at this point stationed an army near Honnoji, and he is an ally of Nobunaga, but for some reason decides to assassinate him. He tells his troops that they are fighting an enemy nearby at Honnoji, and his armies surround the temple where Nobunaga is having his tea ceremony on the 21st of June, 1582. After fighting his enemies back for a while, Nobunaga retreats into the temple and commits seppuku in one of the inner rooms. His son is also attacked by Mitsuhide and also commits suicide. We don't know if it's seppuku as well.
Right.
One of Nobunaga's most trusted retainers then, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who we talked about before, who's a second great unifier, then turns his army towards Nobunaga's position, but it's too late, but he does kill Mitsuhide. Hideyoshi then completes Nobunaga's conquest of Japan within the decade, and following this, Ieyasu completes national unification by 1603, following the Sekigahara campaign. And that ends the story of Oda Nobunaga.
So essentially, he dies by chance. It wasn't planned. It was, obviously it's planned by the enemy, but he did not expect this attack. It happened. He committed, and from that moment on, I imagine, like before, when a big ruler dies, it becomes one big power vacuum. Essentially, everyone's now thinking, "Oh God, the main guy's dead. This is my chance," and they all push towards it. Ends up being his right-hand man, what was his name? The second unifier? Hideyoshi. And from there, and we don't have time to go into that anyway, then from there it squeezes out and they all fight each other all over again until the third man comes, and finally it's all done. There is a unified Japan at last.
That's the important thing. There's no power vacuum. It's perfectly succeeded. Like, his ambition has been taught so well to his juniors that as soon as he dies, the next best person, not his son, the next best person comes into the position.
But did he not want his son?
I don't. He maybe would have thought so. His son's just died though, so I guess that makes it a bit difficult.
Well, yeah, but surely his plans were to leave it to his son.
That wouldn't be that wouldn't really correlate with what Nobunaga's about. Nobunaga's about merit and skill. He probably it's still the 1500s. He probably wants to leave it to his son, but he's probably not going to turn in his grave over the fact that the best man for the job has got it next, and the best man for the job has got it after him. So it's been almost seamless. Like, I think there was some fighting for Ieyasu to get control after Hideyoshi, but they've all gone one after the other, and they've all struck out with these desires, these ambitions of unifying Japan. It's very, very set, like, kind of it's all aligned.
So suddenly you've got this group of this kingdom that is so fractured that couldn't do anything, that's always warring with each other, this feudal Japan, and in the space of one man's short life, it's become unified and stays unified. I mean, I'm sure there are other wars and fractions again over the future, but in reality, this is the beginning of the next chapter of Japan. It's no longer feudal Japan in that sense.
Yeah, this ends Sengoku Jidai, which is what I said. This ends the crazy period of Japan where, you know, it's romanticized and it's all the fighting and it's in like games and movies. Like this part is ended by this guy in 48 years of living.
Yeah.
This fool of
One
Owari.
life.
And that's why I want
Sorry, how old was he when he died? 48?
I would say 48 because I think it's 150,
So I thought he died earlier. I thought he lived not relatively long, but I mean, 50 years and
it's not bad.
Yeah,
it's not bad.
1500s.
Fighting all the time.
Yeah. Pretty decent.
So I guess that kind of centers on why I wanted to talk about Oda Nobunaga. It's a great tale about the extraordinary actions of one man, one great man, who has directly shaped the country today from his actions 500 years ago.
Yeah.
He's one of the great founders of countries like Bismarck, the Qin dynasty in China, and even going back like William the Conqueror. Like they were all on level with these incredible unifiers of land. And I guess this prompted like a bit like an internal discussion for me and like this thought process about like what is the next great unification. Like you have these unifiers. There's there are countries drawn in the sand with a stick basically today. What's the next great unification? I thought maybe like Europe under like one roof, under one umbrella government.
It's an interesting discussion because it kind of what would you describe as a unified place? The EU is probably the biggest, most recent. There are many places that you could say that unification could happen and it could change everything. Are you talking about the present day?
Yeah, so like, you got like the UN, you got NATO, you got the G7. Like they're not really unified, but they're still like alliances and coalitions. Like, what's the next step?
Yeah, alliances are different. I do think the EU is essentially a unifier, but again, it depends what you mean. In my opinion, and maybe this is just because ever since I did the research for the Cuban Missile Crisis a few episodes ago, I've been thinking a lot about a lot of things, and including war and apocalypse, and also space. And I thought that, at some point, probably in our lifetimes, not guaranteed, but at some point in our lifetimes, we will make the first steps towards colonizing Mars. The way we would do that is to create a moon base, because it's a lot easier to ship goods and then to fly them off to Mars.
Is this Pint-Sized History or Pint-Sized Crazy Talk?
No, it's not. I'll tell you right now, it's not science fiction. This is something that should genuinely happen.
Is that like Elon Musk?
In the next 10
Grow
years. Oh, for goodness sake, man. Let me
Where's
say
Grimes?
it. But my point is that, like, at some point in the next 10 years, we should, in some way, start aiming towards that next mission. And you could argue that at that point, once we have colonies on other planets, and again, this is a very long-term thing. This would happen, if we were to have a colony on Mars, a permanent colony, not one that would come back every now and then that would take, decades and decades, maybe hundreds of years. At that point, if that were to happen, would you count Earth as a unified
Continent?
Planet?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, there are constantly warring factions. The EU is a unified place, but everyone's fighting inside it. Some people are leaving it, like us. Yikes!
What a great decision that was.
Oh God.
Boris Johnson.
No, politics.
What a great unifier.
Politics. Places like the United States of America has had states that have considered leaving, like Texas and California have both considered leaving at certain points. They've also considered taking, all these different things are, what do you call a unified nation? What do you call a unifier? Are they good people to unify? Is it wrong to have nations that are separate if they aren't warring? Is unifying even a good thing?
I would say so, yeah, but I'm a big government, like, big social kind of systems help the poor, and I think like big funds of national resources and reserves can go a long way in helping that.
But if the UK promised under the new government that they would make sure that the world was a good place, and by doing it, conquering it and unifying the place, would you say that that's a good thing?
We can discuss that on the next episode. I don't know.
Any unifier is literally fighting that state of wanting to push and conquer the place next to it, and then pretending as if this is the reality now, this is ours.
So very quickly, Joe, the first great unifier. What do you think of this short dive into Oda Nobunaga? What's your thought about him?
Well, I honestly thought we were going to come into the atrocities a bit more. I thought we were going to get into a bit of the wishy-washy about the bad stuff.
Why do you love atrocities?
I don't love him. I just thought we were going to talk about them because I thought they go hand in hand.
Begging me for atrocities.
He from what I gather, he's not necessarily the nicest bloke. But what I will say is that I think anyone that can build from such a small base and branch out like that is worthy of a story, and he's got one of the best.
But yeah, thank you for being patient, and I hope you remembered all the names. I didn't get too confusing at times.
Yeah.
If you are fascinated by the story, then go have a look at it. It is truly amazing.
The next one we're doing is a special one, because the next one that we're doing is Halloween. Isn't that right? We got to prep for. We know what the story is, and shall we say what the story is now, or
Yeah, go on, let's do it.
what we're going to do for next episode's podcast is we're going to do something spooky, something historical, and something real. We're going to talk about someone close to our area, Jack the Ripper.
Thank you for listening. Please drop us a review on whatever podcast you're watching, like and subscribe our podcast, and share them, whatever. Follow us on YouTube, all that sort of stuff. At Pint-Sized History Pod. See you later.
Bye-bye.